Welcome to the ReaderHouse Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. The author I'm talking with right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable says that we all need more humor, especially during the times that we're living in now. The author is Bob Russell, and the book he has out is called Clean Jokes for a Smile. Bob, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Hello, I'm glad to do that.
Bob, can you tell me all about Clean Jokes for a Smile and what readers are in store for here?
Well, as a generalization, humor is always needed in everything, especially in politics. I think the person who exemplified that most of all was Will Rogers back in the 1930s. And I don't think we've had a good comedian like that. But in any event, in anything that we do, a sense of humor is superb. I began by the fact that my father, in the basement, we had a bathroom, and on the wall, he would put up jokes. So you'd be sitting there and reading the jokes, and that got me started on the whole idea of jokes. Myself, I'm not a jokester, but I'm a collection of jokes. There's all kinds of jokes, but you're going to start off by saying simple little puns like, when an airplane lands, why does it go to the terminal? You know, the terminal is the end of life, and things like that.
So was there something in particular, Bob, that sparked you to sit down and get started on this?
Oh, I just had this whole collection of jokes that I had. And I said, what am I going to do with them? I decided, why don't you just put them into a book? None of them are my jokes. They're all collections of jokes from all different sources, from friends, from books, from just listening to people and stuff like that.
When it comes to writing and being published and everything like that, Bob, do you have experience in it, or is this your first time around?
Well, you have to know I'm a metallurgical engineer. And, what's a metallurgical engineer got to do with jokes? Well, I guess there's no limit on what an engineer can do. And then if you told me when I graduated with a degree of engineering that I would be in the wine and beer business, I'd say you're crazy. In 1982, we bought a farm and put it in a vineyard, and now we're making wine. And adjacent farm, we put it in a brewery, and now we're making beer. And my wife does the marketing and the sales on the thing. And here I am, sitting here now, what am I going to do? So I said, well, why not just put your jokes together and make a book out of it?
Once you started collecting the jokes, you put those all together in a manuscript, and then you got that off to Christian Faith. Was that a long journey to get it all published and out there for everybody?
Oh, yeah, about a year and a half it took about to do that. And it was also eliminating jokes that were, how can I say it? There's some pretty nasty jokes out there. I try to eliminate all those and minimize the amount of risqueness of the jokes. There's one or two or three or four in there that are a little bit risque, but most of them are, jokes that will bring you a smile. You can't help but read them and smile. Boy, and the punchline is also important. And a lot of the jokes have a nice punchline.
So would you say this is for all readers then? No age limit or anything?
No age limit, no limits whatsoever. Sex, age, whatever.
I could only imagine what you were feeling, what you were thinking when you finally got your first copy of Clean Jokes for a Smile in, and you got to hold this thing. It's a real thing now. What was that like for you, Bob?
A smile. Well, matter of fact, 3 times a week, my wife and I have breakfast. We live in Westport, Massachusetts, and we're right next to the ocean. So 3 days a week, we have breakfast down by the ocean, right next to the waves of the ocean, and we do 3 things. We have breakfast, we read poetry, I read jokes from the joke book, and then we have a history lesson of one thing or another, like, how long did it take to build a pyramid? Things like that. But the jokes are needed just to keep us smiling. Matter of fact, I think that politicians would always be wise to warm up their audience. For instance, I read the biography of Ronald Reagan, and before he went and talked to a group of people, he would sit outside and talk to the people coming in, and just say, hey, Joe, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. Then he would stand up before the audience and tell a joke or tell a story. And it's my opinion that every politician should be able to warm up the audience with a story, a joke, or something like that, or even a song.
Well, I know this book is going to make a lot of people smile. Again, it's titled Clean Jokes for a Smile. It's written by Bob Russell and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So find it anywhere, like places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Bob, it's been great talking with you tonight. Thanks so much for coming on the show and chatting with me all about your book.
I'm delighted that you even asked me to talk to you. Thank you so much.
The new book by G. Lamont Douglas. It's titled Keys to Transform Your Life. It's designed to help individuals unlock their full potential and achieve their goals. And that's what we're going to be talking about right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. The author, Lamont, is right here with me. Lamont, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thank you for talking with me.
Absolutely. Lamont, can you tell me all about Keys to Transform Your Life and what readers are going to find here?
This is a book that's designed for people who do formal and informal counseling with people, trying to help them. It's from my background as a mental health therapist for 30 years that I have developed this system and assessments. And it's really just a way to give people a launching pad to help others develop goals and find out what's standing in their way and how to overcome them.
Is there anything in particular that sparked you to sit down and write this book?
Yes, a minister that I had been working with and had shared this with a couple of years ago, and he said, you need to really do this. There's not a lot of anything out there, especially for ministers or other people who, do counseling kind of informally with people. And I said, yeah, okay. So then I started writing it, and it just kind of blossomed from there.
How long of a journey have you been on once you sat down, got started on it, up through the publishing and everything?
About 2 years.
When it came to that publishing end of things, there's a lot involved. Lamont, what did you find the most challenging part of that for you?
I felt like I was in Comp 301 forever. All the edits and all the going through and like, oh, I just did that. I submitted that. Wait a minute. What do you mean there's another correction?
Is this your first time doing this kind of thing?
It's my first time writing, yes. Had never thought I'd be an author, and just from the encouragement of a minister and other people who said, yeah, this is a good idea. You need to do something with it, has spurred me to do that. And then I've also got 2 other books I'm working on as well.
I can only imagine then what you were thinking and feeling whenever you got to hold this for the first time, being your first book. It's finally published. It's finally a real thing. What was going through your head?
It's like, wow, did this really happen? That's really what it was. It's like, okay, now what? That was basically, okay, now what? This part of the, how do you publicize it? How do you get it out there? What do you do? And I've never done anything like this. And so my head's been spinning ever since.
And now you're officially a published author, Lamont. When you think about that, what's the most rewarding part of it for you?
Just that I'm hoping that people find this useful and where it helps others. That's really what I'm about. I'm not looking for fame. I'm not looking for accolades. I'm really just doing that and then a couple other books that are follow-up to that, just as a way of giving back the gifts that God has given me.
This can be quite the learning experience, doing it for the first time. So do you have any advice now that you'd be able to throw out there for the aspiring authors who are listening to us?
Don't give up. Keep on it and just don't give up and don't be discouraged and realize there's a lot of times where you feel like I'm not making progress. Oh, I'm just wasting my time and effort, money, everything else. Just keep at it. It will eventually come to fruition. You just have to keep going and not just throw up your hands and say, I'm done.
Lamont, who or what do you have in your life that inspires you, especially when it comes to the creative kinds of things, writing and whatnot?
I'd say my faith is the biggest inspiration. I think a lot of this has really come from the blessings that God has given me to be in the career that I've been for 30 years and the experiences that I've had that have really developed this system, developed these tools that I use. Got a very supportive wife, have other friends and family, colleagues that have been very supportive of me in this process and have given me a lot of very good feedback, both positive and negative, that I needed to hear when I needed to hear it.
When you actually sat down to write this, was the writing itself easy, or did you have some challenges, maybe a little bit of writer's block, or you didn't know how to put that into words?
Finding time to actually write was the difficulty. A lot of times I would write it in the evenings. When writer's block, it was just having time to write it. Like I said, work full time, take care of other obligations that I have with family, friends, church, and then finding time to write on top of that.
Well, definitely something that's needed. Great message in this book, and I think people are going to get a lot out of it. Again, this is called Keys to Transform Your Life. It's written by G. Lamont Douglas and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So go on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes. Also take a walk down the street at your local bookshop and you'll be able to pick this up. Well, Lamont, it was great talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Author Peggy C. Jones wants to help readers see the world through her eyes in her new book, The Magic in My Clouds. And I'm going to find out all about this book. I'm really happy that Peggy is here with me right now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Peggy, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you, and I'm curious about The Magic in My Clouds. So, Peggy, can you tell me all about that? What did you write about here?
I wrote about the things that I see in the clouds, the figures. I see a lot of angels. I always have since I was a child. I've been able to read clouds, and I've always stated to my cousins and my family, oh, do you see them running in the clouds? And they're like, no. And so now I actually have proof of what I see in the clouds. And the first one to actually come and speak with me through my dreams was Poseidon. And so I have him in the clouds. I have Zeus. So all of them come to me through the clouds and speak to me through my dreams.
Peggy, what sorts of readers do you think would be really into this?
Well, I would love it if it can capture everyone, any age. It's fun reading. It's interesting. It's my life. It's the window I've always seen out of. It's been difficult for me because no one else can see what I see. And so it's been pretty lonely, but very fun. And the angels are the most fun. And I just hope that it can intrigue everyone, any age.
Was there something in particular that sparked you to sit down and get started on this book?
Yes, it was. Actually, it kept gnawing at me for about 20 years. And then after my heart surgery in August 2020, through my surgery, I woke up in the middle of my surgery. And after my surgery, what I saw was Jesus walking with me, and everywhere I stepped was a lighted path. And so my home is decorated as a fairy. My room is sunset orange. My daughter's room is the ocean. My son's room is the forest. Fairies and Paris is the theme. And so my whole house is decorated, and it's stickers. It's like what you can put on your wall and peel off. I had to find patience after my heart surgery. Still found none, but through my books and through the clouds, I have found it. And it's so beautiful and so wonderful.
Well, Peggy, what does your writing background look like? Do you have a lot of experience in this?
I do not. My aunt taught me about this when I was a small girl. I used to have very, very vivid dreams to where they were actually standing in front of me, and I would scream out a lot, and my mom had to call my aunt a lot to come and sit with me and talk to me about what I was seeing. My aunt and my father, they were raised on a reservation in Tennessee. They're Cherokee Native. And so a lot of my dreams are just so vivid, and I see everything. And so my aunt taught me from a young age how to handle it, how to deal with it, write it down if I can, talk to them if I can. And that's what I learned from a very young age.
Now, you said this idea was just gnawing at you for decades before you got started on it. So once you actually did get started on it, was it a long time, the writing, the publishing, everything?
It actually was not. It was probably a total of maybe 3 months, a month and a half probably to write the book and then get it out to Newman Springs Publishing, which has been great. They've been a lifesaver because I've always wanted to get my story out for people to see what I mean, I could be speaking with you and all of a sudden someone's going to appear on the side of you and it's like, oh, and they're always looking at me like, what? I'm like, oh, nothing. I did the same thing with my nurse, and I'm like, oh, my God, I know that horse. And I'm like, well, I don't know the doggone horse. That mountain is in England. And it happens, her name was Elizabeth. And I said, well, this little girl that I'm seeing, she's holding her arms out to the side, and she's turning circles. And she started crying. She said, can I show you a picture? And I said, yeah. Showed me a picture of her as a little girl with her arms out to her side, swirling in circles. I'm like, oh, great. Okay. Well, we're on the same page. So it's just, I love it because when I meet you, when I get with you, I get to see your life most of the time, and I get to see what was fun.
Well, what was it like when you finally got the first copy of this in? You got to hold The Magic in My Clouds for that very first time. It must have been a crazy moment for you.
It was so wonderful to see what I see actually in a book to where everyone could actually see what I see. It's wonderful that I can share with everyone that what I've been saying my whole life. Ever since I was a small girl laying in the park in the grass, looking up at the clouds saying, wow, you see those little kids? And I'm like, no. It's so wonderful now that I can share it with everyone.
Well, what a fascinating book this sounds like. I think people are going to love this. Again, the book is titled The Magic in My Clouds. It's written by Peggy C. Jones, published by Newman Springs Publishing, So really, you can get it anywhere, like go on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores, and you'll definitely be able to find this. Well, Peggy, thank you again for coming on the show and telling me all about this. It's so fascinating. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
There's a tale of faith and redemption in the new book by Steve Wilcox. The book's titled The Painting, a Novel. And we're going to talk all about that right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. The author, Steve, is right here with me. Steve, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm interested in The Painting, a novel, Steve. So can you tell me what you wrote about here?
I have a young lady who lost her father to a drunk driver when she was 8 years old, turns her back on God, then move ahead 15 years. She's in her mid-20s now, and she has her own accident, is in a medically induced coma, has 2 conversations with God, and the story of what happens when she comes out of the coma.
Steve, what kinds of readers were you writing this for?
It's a Christian love story, so people who are interested in Christian literature and human relationships.
How were you inspired to write this, Steve? Where did the idea come from?
The idea came from 2 sources. One, I wanted to write about coming home to God because God is an important part of my life. But secondly, there's a stained glass window at Porcelain in Glendale, California, Michelangelo's The Last Supper. I use that as the impetus, and the painting refers to a modern rendition of The Last Supper.
So once you sat down, got started writing the painting, up through the publishing process and everything, Steve, was this a long journey for you?
Yeah. The first draft, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with National Novel Writing Month.
Absolutely.
I write my novels in November, so the painting, the first draft took me 24 days. I worked on it for a year before I gave it to the publisher, and they took about 9 months to get it out. So we're looking at about almost 2 years from the first draft to where we are today.
I know this isn't your first time around. You have a lot of books out there. So does that feeling ever get old for you, Steve, whenever you finally get your first copy of that book in, you get to hold that thing you've been working on for so long? Does that ever get old for you?
Oh, no. No. It's like being a parent. You never get old of having a child.
So you're a published author. Like I said, you got a lot of work out there, Steve. When you think about that, what's the most rewarding aspect of it for you?
The comments I get from my family, my friends, and from strangers. I get comments from people from around the country who found one of my books, read it, and give me a review on Amazon or drop me a note on Messenger or through my Facebook.
Now, once you hand your manuscript off to the publisher, you start that publishing process, and there's a lot involved in that. What do you find the most challenging part of that publishing process, Steve?
Time. I get anxious for it to come out, and I want it to go faster than what their process really is. I'm just anxious for people to see the new creation, what it is.
I have a feeling that we might not have seen the last book from you, Steve. Have you thought about more?
I have 2 about to be published, and a third one I will write in November for NaNoWriMo, which is the sequel to The Painting.
Is most of your writing in the fiction realm?
Yes, I have one nonfiction about my best friend from the Navy who was killed in Vietnam and what happened to him when he and his body vanished for 50 years. We found him. But most of it is fiction. I have the space-based series that I'm working on. I also have a clean murder mystery series I'm working on. And I'm a substitute teacher and was challenged to write a preteen fantasy book for my 5th grade classes. I just finished that.
I love that you mentioned National Novel Writing Month. It's hugely popular. So going into that, do you have an outline that you try to go by, or do you just start with an idea and then just go from there?
I'm a pantser. If you know what that is, I sit down and write. I've tried outlining. I outlined the first 8 scenes of the painting, and by I got to scene 3, I was no longer following what I had planned out. It just takes off and goes by itself.
Is writer's block ever a thing that you got to deal with?
Not really. In my first murder mystery, I had a problem in how was I going to get information to the police, and a friend of mine talked to me for 2 hours and solved the problem for me. But no, I really don't face writer's block.
I think readers are really going to love this novel. If you're listening right now, definitely give it a shot. Again, it's titled The Painting, a Novel. It's written by Steve Wilcox and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so find it everywhere, places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Steve, thank you so much again for joining me here and telling me all about your work. It was great talking tonight.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Tales from Misty Acres is the name of the new book by Owen ODonnell, and it's a journey filled with humor, wisdom, and the magic of imagination. And that's what we're going to be talking all about right now. Owen is right here with me. Owen, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Can you tell me all about Tales from Misty Acres and what you've written about here?
Well, Tales from Misty Acres are a summation or compilation of stories that I used to tell my daughters when they were much, much younger. They loved to have me read to them, except they had a fixation on a book called The Saggy Baggy Elephant and the Tawny Scrawny Lion. And it got to the point where they'd bring it to me. Read me a story, Daddy. Read me a story. And once after doing it for God knows how many times, I said, how about if I tell you a story? They said, okay. And so I just took examples from, without mentioning it, to things that had happened to me in my life and wrapped it up into a community of little animals who did very human things. You know, like the typical, if you have children of your own, you may have told them, if you go someplace, tell Daddy where you're going so I don't worry about you. And then they'd just go off and they'd be having a wonderful time, forgetting all about what Daddy had asked them to do. And I'd weave that into a story and say, well, why are Bobby's mommy and Daddy so concerned? They didn't know where he was, Daddy. Oh, sort of like Mommy and me sometimes? Yes, Daddy. And I'd say, well, and we'd just go on with the story. The stories have been around for years and years and years. And probably in the late 1990s, I was getting ready for Christmas, and I said to my oldest daughter, sweetheart, what do you want for Christmas? She said, Daddy, I want you to write me 2 stories, but one of them has to be a Christmas story. So I went ahead and told her a story about how a little bullfrog learned the true meaning of Christmas.
Once you got started on this, Owen, how long of a process was it for you, writing it and getting it published and everything?
Well, the stories were all written more or less and stored on my hard drive. And I fiddled around with it and decided, well, what the heck? Let me try this publishing company. It did. They gave me some directions, went ahead, and it's officially published, I'd say, about 3 or 4 months ago. 12 stories. They have no humans in it, just little animals doing very familiar things that little kids often do. And I would stop in the middle of a story and say, well, why do you suppose such and such happen? Well, they'd get into it. They began to like it and want more stories. And so, we just went on with it.
Do you think you would write more after this? Do you have more stories to tell?
Yeah, I've already got, there's 12 stories in the book. And the 13th story, or what I like to call first story in volume 2, is written. And as soon as we get things going in the local area, I can concentrate on, set a time aside to go ahead and script another story or 2 or 3 and keep going.
Oh, and a lot of our listeners right now are authors who are just starting out in everything, and I'm sure you learned an awful lot along the way of doing this. Do you have any advice that you could throw out there for them?
I don't know. My education was such that I had a lot of preparation. Both my high school and college were at formal schools where I had 4 courses in philosophy, 4 in theology. All I'd say is if somebody's really interested I don't mind them contacting me, and I would be more than happy to make my suggestions, and also to, try and help them get the things laid out and get started, because starting is probably the most difficult thing to do. Probably in the late 90s, when I asked my oldest daughter what she wanted for Christmas, she said, I want you to write 2 stories, Daddy, but one has to be a Christmas story. So that was the beginning of a Christmas story for Bobby. And then, ironically enough, a story about the little bullfrog.
Well, again, this book is titled Tales from Misty Acres. It's written by Owen ODonnell and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can get it at places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Oh, Owen, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about this. It was really nice chatting with you tonight.
Well, I appreciate it very much, and I thank you for taking the time.
I'm looking at a book right now that's a testament to faith and redemption. It's written by Melanie D, and it's called His Love Endures Forever. We're going to be talking all about this right now. Melanie is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Melanie, thank you so much for being here.
I thank you.
Absolutely. Can you tell me all about what you've written in His Love Endures Forever?
Well, this book is my autobiography, and it starts from my childhood into womanhood. And it's basically about God wanting us to know that He is a loving God and that there is nothing that can't be overcome. This book will show you the importance of being patient and waiting on His timing and not our own.
Melanie, what was your target audience for this? Who were you thinking of?
My target audience and readers would be both Christian and non-Christian. Women of all ages, they will be the ones who can relate to something within this book, especially the women who were or are looking for their self-worth and validation through relationships with worldly men.
So how did the idea for this come about, Melanie? What sparked you to get started on this?
Actually, the Holy Spirit sparked me. I had taken a class at a church, and they asked me a question. If you could ask God something, what would it be? So I blurted out Jeremiah 29:11. I said, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future." After I asked that question, I kept hearing that still small voice saying, "Write a book, write a book." And I kept dismissing it, but it wouldn't stop. And then I had a dream, and in the dream, I had already written the book. So it was confirmed. I started writing the book, and before the class was over at the church, I was given my testimony that God answered my question.
Once you got started on this, Melanie, how long of a journey was this for you? Clear up through the publishing and being out there for everybody.
It took me probably about 3 years to actually write the book. But then due to some circumstances, I had to set it aside for, 2 or 3 years before I reached out to a publisher. And then after I reached out to the publisher, it actually took another probably 2 years to get it out to the public.
So is this your first foray into the world of writing and publishing, or do you have some experience in it?
This actually is my first time writing a book. I'm a first-time author.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So then after all that work that you put into it, finally that day came, the first copy, there it is. It's a real thing. You got to hold it in your hands. Melanie, what were you thinking and feeling at that point?
I was actually both elated and ecstatic when I finally had the book in my hand because it was quite the journey for me.
And now you're officially a published author. So when you think about that, what's the most rewarding aspect of it for you?
I think the most rewarding aspect is that I myself am hoping that it touches the hearts of other women and that they can get something out of this book. They can relate to it. There's going to be something inside this book that they can definitely relate to because it's real life experiences. That and the fact that I was obedient when God answered that question and I completed the task and the assignment that He wanted me to do.
Have you given thought to maybe writing another and publishing again?
No, not at this time. I mean, if I hear something from the Lord, all that might change. But for now, no, I haven't really thought about it.
Now, once you wrote this, you handed the manuscript off to Christian Faith. You started that publishing process. Was there anything particularly challenging about that publishing process you can think of?
I think the most challenging thing probably was the amount of times that I had to go through the editing. Because every time I was editing the book, they'd send it back to me. They were fantastic, by the way. But
That's
every
great.
time they sent it back to me, I had to reprint all 255 pages, and I had to reread everything to make sure that nothing got dropped. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know this book is going to be an inspiration to so many people. And if you're listening right now, go check this out. Again, the title is His Love Endures Forever. It's written by Melanie D. and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so find it anywhere, like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, or also right down the street at your local bookshop. Well, Melanie, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about this story. It was really great talking with you tonight.
Well, thank you. And I thank my readers.
The audiobook edition of author Sam Yacoub's book, Ankh. Let those who dwell on earth know what's about to come next, Revelation 3:10. It's out now, and Sam, the author, is here with me. We get to talk all about this. Sam, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thank you so much. I actually appreciate you.
Well, it's great talking with you, and I'm curious about Ankh and what readers and audiobook listeners are going to find here, Sam. Can you tell me about it?
Well, the name Ankh actually portray the headed cross, typically from the old ancient Egyptian artifacts. And it has a meaning. It basically actually has two meanings, life and death, if you would. I use a name just to drive the reader towards the era, if you would, that I'm taking the fiction towards. But the book starts with nowadays events. As a matter of fact, I wrote that book in 2023. It was published only this year after 9 months of editing and back and forth on certain things. But it starts in this era, if you would, and then goes back on the fiction side to take us to a time in ancient Egypt was very, very known to most people. The Exodus, if you would, from Egypt, yes.
And Sam, what sort of a reading audience were you after here?
I really wanted to audience that looking or searching for more than historic data, searching for things about life, things about where we're heading from here. In that book, we predicted what's happening right now specifically in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, the war there. We predicted that about a year ago before it happened. As a matter of fact, there are some predictions there that haven't happened yet, so I'm excited to see how the people react to what they read. Much of what we wrote in the book not only convey what's happening between Israel and Hamas, but it talks about America, it talks about the nations, the direction the world is taking. I'm hoping people will get excited just to see what possibly could happen next.
Sam, what does your writing background look like? Are you new to all this?
Actually, I graduated from a science school, and in my life, I was in the business for a long time, most of my life. And then when I started to kind of put the business aside and look back at all the information that I gathered, the knowledge I had throughout my years, I felt that I'm compelled to put it on paper. And I was really actually inspired by my faith in God to write that book. And much of the things in it is actually geared towards man and faith and where everybody stands.
And like I said, we're talking about the audiobook edition. So was that a smooth process for you, Sam, to find just that right voice you were going after?
It was a lengthy process. It was, back and forth until we believe we perfected it. And the reason, obviously, I went with audiobook is the direction for most people, especially the younger generations, if you would. They like to actually listen to the books rather than reading it. And many people, even of age, if you would, in talking to them, said, I don't have a lot of time to sit down and read as much as before. And they would love to have it in the audio format. So we decided to have it in print and audio.
So all that time when you're writing it and you're working on getting it edited down, you're reading your words off that page. And now in the audiobook edition, somebody else is reading your own book back to you. Sam, what's that like?
It's different, obviously. I'm listening to not my voice, but someone else's voice telling the story about it, except because the characters are used, I have to relate to people I know. So when I wrote the characters, although they're fiction, but I used the people around me to implant them in the book that would give me a little bit of direction of how people react to things. So in listening to it in audio format, and the names that I use are actual living people, some, as a matter of fact, their background is used in the book as well. So it was kind of easier for me in that respect.
Well, it sounds like readers and audiobook listeners are really going to be into this. The title again is Ankh. Let those who dwell on earth know what's about to come next, Revelation 3:10. This is a book written by Sam Yacoub, and it's published by the Audiobook Network. So go to the places where you'd usually go to get your audiobooks, and you'll find it, like Audible, iTunes, or Amazon. Sam, it's been great talking tonight. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate what you guys are doing for us.
Right now, here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, I'm really happy to welcome author Sishman Rimpson. Sishman, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me, sir. My pleasure.
The pleasure's all mine. It's exciting. You have a new memoir you just put out called Defining Moments. So, Sishman, can you tell me all about it?
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having me on your platform. I really appreciate it. Defining Moments is a memoir that I wrote as a gift to my children. I wanted my children, when I am dead and gone, to have something to pass on to their children, to tell them who their grandfather was or who their great-grandfather was. So it's really an identity for my family. Legacy is what it was about for me. And in Defining Moments, I put together 15 moments in my life that, good, bad, and indifferent, that have shaped the man that I am presently today. But not all of those moments were joyful moments, but each one of those defining moments shaped my ideals, the way I respond to situations, the work ethic that I have. Thank God we were able to become a pretty successful entrepreneur, but it didn't start that way. I started, my family was broken. I was born in Gary, Indiana in the 70s, 80s. Gary, Indiana was a murder cap of the nation. And so it was riddled with gang violence and drugs. And I was a victim of that circumstance. Both of my parents were victims to those times. And so it didn't start off great. It's a gritty story, but today we are definitely living the dream. And I wanted people to read this book and be inspired, to be encouraged, to be motivated, to know that how you start does not have to dictate how you finish, and to know that where there is a will, there is a way. And that's what Defining Moments is going to do to the reader and for the reader. It's going to encourage you. It's going to inspire you, I believe, to action. And again, I'm just so blessed that you have me on your platform and give me an opportunity to share my gift of love again to the world.
Absolutely. Thank you for telling me all about that. As far as the readership goes, the people out there who really enjoy this the most, do you have an idea for that?
Absolutely. I knew because of my influence in my city where I come from, I've always been asked by those that I mentor and different people that I meet. I'm also a keynote speaker, and so I get the opportunity to meet a lot of people. And I was always asked, Sish, when are you going to write a book? Sish, when are you going to pen a book? Sish, you should tell your story, Sish. And so, I got enough guts and had enough faith one day. Sit out with my wife and say, "Babe, I'm just going to start penning it. I'm just going to start writing it." And so, of course, I had my children in mind, but I also had just the average Joe, the person that does not or will not ever meet Sishman, but who can read this book and be inspired by the words that were written on those pages. And man, I tell you, the response has been amazing. I've gotten emails from Africa and emails from people over in Asia and, people who bought in the book. And it's just unbelievable the impact that people are saying this book has had for them. And so, of course, my family was in mind, but of course, any person who would touch this book or any person who, would hear this book, it's out in audio as well. My prayer was that it would inspire everyone to action. And so, absolutely, I was thinking about everyone.
I could only imagine what you were thinking, what you were feeling when that first copy of Defining Moments finally came in. You got to hold it for that first time. What was going through your head?
Oh, man, honestly, what went through my head is my dad would be proud of me. My dad passed away in 2019 from cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When I first got that copy, just to see the smile on my kid's face, it just meant so much, man. And one of my sons said, "Dad, you never not finish what you start." He said, "Man, you never not finish what you start, Dad." And so at this point in my life, man, everything I do, I hope and pray that it pushes glory to God first and foremost, and that my kids are inspired and motivated and proud of me. It was a very surreal, humbling moment. I never thought that I would be an author, but to hold that book, man, and to see, the cover and what was created, it was a blessing, brother. It was a blessing.
I know there are readers being blessed by this book right now, and I think there are going to be a lot more blessed from it. Definitely check this out. Again, the title is Defining Moments. This is written by Sishman Rimpson, published by Covenant Books, and it's available everywhere. So check it out at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or even traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Sishman, it's been really great talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
No, thank you so much for having me, bro. God bless you and all your listeners. I really appreciate the opportunity.
The new book, written by Donna L. Smith, is a guide to Christian character development. It's titled Many Moments of Value. And I get to find out all about this book. Donna, the author, is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Donna, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's good to be able to do this. It's an honor.
Well, it's good to be talking with you. It's good to be finding out about many moments of value. Donna, can you tell me all about this book?
Okay. It has 62 biblical values in it, values that are actually, in the Bible. The journey started years ago when we were on a trip and passed by a school with a sign that said Value of the Month, RESPECT. And it struck a chord with me because it made me realize that values aren't being taught in family. A school has to do it now. And that's been a long time ago. More than 10 years for sure. So that's what the book is about, to explore the biblical values to help define what values are.
What sorts of readers were you writing this for?
Really, it's not just for quote-unquote Christians. It is for anybody that has an interest in living a life of peace, living a life that has meaning to someone else. And the word meaning in the title is really to draw attention. It doesn't take long to do, just a few seconds to do something that really can be an inspiration, a help of value to someone else.
Have you ever done anything like this before, Donna? What's your writing background look like?
Well, this is really my first book, as far as first books go. My interest in writing began when I was in 8th grade, and our English teacher assigned all her classes a writing assignment, which was to write a play to be put on for the school, and my play was chosen out of about probably 180 students. That began my writing journey, and it evolved into poetry. I've been published in a church school paper, just poetry, poetic thoughts. And then through the years, I've written plays and dramas for our church, for our kids' programs. And then it developed into writing a discipleship program for our church where we pastored. Different venues like that is really where most of my writing has been. But this really didn't start out to be a book. When we saw that sign, my husband and I were talking about it. He said, well, maybe you could start on Sunday mornings and give a mini moment and think about the value and talk about it for 2 or 3 minutes, just enough to stir some interest. And so I did that. Well, I had to keep up with what I had done. So I began keeping a list on my computer and then writing about it. And it just took wings and became a book. So that's really how the book began.
And then that day came and it was finally a real thing. You got to hold your first copy and you got to look at it with your name on the cover and everything. What was that like, Donna?
It was a moment of fulfillment because it wasn't something that happened overnight. The process, not just of the writing side, because it took me 10 plus years to write it all. Because I would work on it, and then I'd have to set it aside for other needs. And so it was a slow process in the writing, but the process of the editing and the things I learned in those processes, I think were of value to me personally. You edit and you change, you edit and you change, you edit and you change. It does expand you in more ways than one.
Absolutely. What did you find the most challenging about the publishing process overall?
Time. And money.
Those are big ones.
Yes, sir. But the publishing process does not happen in a couple of weeks. You can self-publish on a computer, but it's just not the same. And you don't have the expertise that you would normally have with a publishing company. I really learned a lot, and it was a good learning.
Well, I really think this book is going to be a huge blessing to so many readers. And if you're listening right now, go check this out. The title again is Many Moments of Value. It's written by Donna L. Smith and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So you can find it everywhere, really, like Amazon, and Barnes & Noble, and iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Donna, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight. Thank you so much for coming on the show with me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation, and I am delighted. And to all my readers, thank you, because you make the book a success.
Author Robert Recchio's new book is an exploration of end-times theology. It's titled The Pre-Tribulation Rapture of the Church, Premillennial. And we're going to be talking all about this. Robert is right here with me now. Robert, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be on with your show, and I'm just excited to promote the book that God gave me to write. It was His doing that I wrote this book.
Robert, can you tell me about it? What are readers going to find in it?
Well, first of all, there is a lot of confusion about the sequence of the end-time events, and I show all the viewpoints. Of course, I am what you call a dispensationalist. That means that I believe in the dispensations and the difference between the church and Israel. And I believe in the pre-tribulation rapture. What I mean by that, the tribulation is the 70th week of Daniel. And that period lasts for 7 Jewish years. And the Jewish calendar is based on a 360-day year that's based on the lunar cycle rather than solar cycle. So the tribulation lasts exactly 2,520 days. As you can tell, I love math and I love numbers. My career was in software engineering, so I'm very precise. And I believe in sticking to the truth of God's word. I don't make outlandish predictions, but whatever I say in my book, I can back with scripture, and that's what I endeavor to do. I also studied the alternative views, and I studied the scriptures they use, and that's how I'm going to start. I also wrote this book not only for the believer, but for those who are seeking the truth. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't believe in absolute truth. In fact, I'm going to say all of morality is based on absolute truth. If you don't have absolute truth, then morality doesn't exist. I don't know if that makes logical sense to you.
Absolutely. Oh, Robert, once you got started writing this, how long of a journey were you on? Did this take you a long time to write and put through that publishing process?
Actually, I wrote the 174 pages in 2 months, believe it or not.
Have you ever done anything like this before? Have you written or published before this?
No. First time publishing. And I can thank my wife. You know, I worked as a software engineer for 35 years, 25 for IBM, and 10 years for Lockheed Martin. And I did not have a college degree, but I did IT work for the NSA, the FBI, and the CIA. I had top secret clearances, but I didn't have a piece of paper that said degree. And I often ask myself, how come I think differently than most people and I can't hack college? Well, my wife had me tested for Asperger's. And I had no idea I had this all my life. I'm going to say a little joke. It took me 75 years before I knew I was a genius.
I love it.
But I've been studying this subject. I could understand things right away. At the age of 12, when I first heard about the rapture and the gospel was presented to me when I was a 12-year-old kid, I had a godly grandmother. My grandmother was filled with the Holy Spirit, and she showed her love for all of her grandkids, and she wanted to make sure that we would find out the truth.
Well, I think an awful lot of readers are really going to love this book. They're going to be into it. Again, the title is The Pre-Tribulation Rapture of the Church, Premillennial. It's written by Robert Recchio and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So you can find it places like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Robert, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about your work. It's been nice chatting tonight.
It's been great having this conversation, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.